If I asked you to picture, the ultimate American retirement abroad, you are probably imagining something very specific.
Right, like a very specific aesthetic.
Exactly. You're picturing maybe a sun-drenched beach in Mexico, maybe a cold drink in your hand, or you are wandering the cobblestone streets of some villa in Spain where everything just moves at a fraction of the speed you're used to.
A totally stress-free existence.
Yeah. But what if I told you the number one destination for U.S. retirees collecting their benefits overseas right now is actually Japan?
It completely shatters that postcard image most people have in their heads, doesn't it?
It really does.
We have this collective cultural fantasy about moving abroad as this simple, clean break. I mean, you finish your working years, you step on a plane, and your problems just stay behind at the departure gate.
I think we all want to believe that. But when you start peeling back the layers on the actual data, that simple, sunny picture gets incredibly complicated.
Very quickly.
Today, for this deep dive, we are taking a look at a massive stack of source material. It's this really fascinating data analysis on Americans retiring abroad. We have official Social Security Administration data, some very revealing recent polling numbers, and a deep look into the, honestly, very intimidating financial regulations that these expats have to face.
The red tape is no joke.
It really isn't. So our mission today is to explore this massive yawning gap between the fantasy of moving abroad that so many of you listening might share and the statistical reality of actually pulling it off.
Right, because the reality is a whole different ballgame.
So true. We are going to uncover hidden demographics, bureaucratic traps, and some truly surprising truths about where American retirees are really going and how they are surviving once they get there.
And this is a crucial topic for you to understand, especially right now. Because while the desire to leave the country is just skyrocketing, the hard data tells a much more complicated story.
Yeah, a story of invisible expats and legal labyrinths that most people do not even realize exist until they are already caught in them.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let's start with just how many people are dreaming about this, because the sheer volume is staggering.
The polling is wild.
It is. According to a 2025 Harris poll in our source material, 44% of U.S. adults say they have seriously considered moving abroad.
That is almost half the country.
Half the country. And it isn't just idle dinner party chatter either. 14% of those adults say they are actively planning or contemplating a move within the next 2 years.
Which represents a massive, massive portion of the population looking for the exit doors.
And the historical shift here is what really caught my eye. There is a 2024 Monmouth University poll showing that 17% of Americans aged 55 and older would resettle outside the country if they could.
17%.
Right. Now, compare that to a Gallup poll from back in 1974. Back then, when asked the exact same question, only 4% of Americans wanted to leave.
Wow.
Yeah. In 50 years, the desire to retire abroad has more than quadrupled.
The cultural narrative has definitively shifted. I mean, retiring abroad has been mainstreamed. It is no longer viewed as something only the ultra-wealthy or the incredibly eccentric do.
It's just a normal retirement plan now.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have this massive wave of people who want to go, millions actively planning it. But here is the central mystery that honestly broke my brain a little bit.
Let's hear it.
When you look at the official government count, the numbers just completely fall off a cliff. According to the Social Security Administration data, only about 712,000 Americans actually receive their Social Security benefits at a foreign address.
That is barely 1% of all Social Security beneficiaries.
Barely 1%. So I have to ask you, what is going on here? Are Americans just all talk when it comes to this?
Not exactly.
Is it just a fantasy people talk about to sound interesting, or is there a fundamental flaw in how the government is actually counting these people?
What's fascinating here is that the official data is almost certainly a massive undercount. The Social Security Administration tabulates these beneficiaries based entirely on the official address they have on file.
Okay.
Now, in theory, a retiree who moves abroad is supposed to update their address with the government. But there is absolutely no automatic trigger that forces them to do so when they leave the country.
Wait, I am confused. You can just pack up, move to a chalet in the French Alps, and the U.S. government just assumes you are still living in your old house in Ohio.
Essentially, yes, if you don't actively raise your hand and tell them otherwise. And there are incredibly strong incentives for retirees to keep quiet about their move.
Like what?
Well, shifting your official address to a foreign country can immediately complicate your taxes. It can complicate your local voting rights in your home state.
Oh, that makes sense.
And crucially, it heavily complicates your Medicare paperwork. So what happens is a lot of retirees just quietly maintain a U.S. address. Yeah, they use a relative's house. Or they pay for a specialized mail forwarding service in states like Texas or South Dakota, and they never make the official change with the government.
It is like trying to count modern cell phone users by looking at a printed landline directory from 1998.
That's a great analogy.
The government is using this completely outdated mechanism, a self-reported mailing address, and it is only capturing the tiny fraction of people who actually opted into being tracked. Everyone else is just living off the grid, statistically speaking.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, there is another group entirely missing from this count.
Who is that?
Not everyone who retires abroad is actually collecting Social Security yet. Many early retirees might move overseas in their early 60s, but they purposefully delay claiming their benefits until age 70.
To maximize their monthly payouts, right?
Exactly. And because they aren't receiving checks yet, they are completely invisible in this specific data set.
Okay, so we know the official count of 712,000 is heavily flawed. There are way more American retirees out there than the Social Security Administration realizes.
Way more.
But that brings us back to my very first point. Where on earth are they actually going? Because, as we established, it is not just Margaritaville.
No, the Margaritaville myth is a very persistent narrative, but the hard data points in a completely different direction.
Right. Looking at the official numbers of where people are actually collecting their Social Security abroad, Japan takes the #1 spot with roughly 108,000 beneficiaries.
Which surprises a lot of people.
And right behind it in the #2 spot is Canada, with 107,000 beneficiaries. Europe, as an entire continent, only draws about 38% of overseas recipients.
Yeah.
Why Japan and Canada? I mean, they are known for high costs of living and, well, pretty significant winters.
It challenges the assumption that people only move for the tropical weather or the dirt cheap real estate.
Yeah.
Moves to places like Japan and Canada are often driven by deep family ties.
Oh.
Yeah, it's individuals returning to their country of origin after a career in the States, or former military and corporate expats who decided to stay after their postings ended. It is about community and established roots, not just finding the cheapest beach.
But then we hit the most baffling data point in this entire analysis, and it brings us right back to that idea of the invisible retiree we were just talking about. Let's look at the Mexico anomaly.
This is a wild one.
The State Department estimates there are about 1.6 million U.S. citizens living in Mexico right now.
A very large established population right across the southern border.
Right. And if you apply the standard U.S. age demographic mix to that population, where about 18% of people are aged 65 or older, there should logically be nearly 290,000 retirement-age U.S. citizens living in Mexico.
But if you look at the official Social Security data,
Only about 58,000 collect Social Security at a Mexican address. Where are the other 230,000 people?
this is perhaps the prime example of the shadow retiree population. Mexico perfectly facilitates this kind of dual existence because of its geography.
Because it's so close.
Right, because it is so close, you can easily drive or take a short flight back to the U.S. You can maintain that P.O. box in Texas or California. You can keep your U.S. bank accounts open without raising suspicion.
Most importantly, you can cross the border to use your Medicare benefits if you need a major surgery or specialized treatment.
Exactly.
So you have hundreds of thousands of retirees essentially living in Mexico full-time, but officially, on paper, they're still residents of the United States. They're just taking a really, really long vacation in the eyes of the government.
Exactly. They're enduring the logistical headache of hiding their true addresses, specifically to maintain their U.S. ties and benefits. They are statistical ghosts.
So what does this all mean? If maintaining this shadow existence in Mexico is so exhausting, constantly having to cross a border just to see a doctor or check your mail, the financial payoff must be absolutely life-changing.
It has to be.
What is the actual math driving people to live this double life?
The motivation for the vast majority of these people comes down to the brutal reality of their monthly budget.
Let's break that math down for a second using the data from our sources. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average retired U.S. household spends about $5,000 a month on consumer expenditures.
$5,000.
Yeah, $5,000 just to maintain a baseline standard of living, housing, food, basic utilities.
Keep that number in mind, $5,000 a month going out.
Now look at what is coming in. As of December 2025, the average Social Security check was just $2,071.
That is a staggering shortfall.
It really is.
If a retiree is relying primarily on Social Security, they are looking at a nearly $3,000 gap every single month. For a massive chunk of the population, retiring in the United States simply does not pencil out.
And that is exactly what the polling reflects. The sources show that among the 26% of baby boomers who are open to moving abroad in the next 2 years, an overwhelming 71% of them cite a lower cost of living as the core reason.
Makes complete sense.
It totally makes sense. You take that $2,071 Social Security check and try to live in the United States, you're barely scraping by in most major cities.
But if you take that exact same check abroad, the purchasing power transforms completely.
The source material highlights places highly ranked by the International Living Global Retirement Index. We're talking places like Greece, Portugal, and Mexico.
Right.
In those countries, that single monthly check of $2,000 can actually cover a very comfortable life. You aren't just surviving, you're going out to eat, you have a nice place to live, you might even have someone helping clean your home. The math suddenly works.
But cost is not the only driver pushing people out.
It's not. And looking at the survey data objectively, we are seeing two other major drivers pushing people out: healthcare access and general political dissatisfaction.
Yeah, those are big ones.
And just to be clear, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, the data is just showing us that a significant chunk of people are looking at the current systems in the U.S., feeling incredibly frustrated by the polarization or the healthcare costs, and deciding they would rather try their luck elsewhere.
Which brings us to a crucial caveat, especially regarding that healthcare piece. This is something anyone considering this move needs to understand deeply.
What's that?
You might be moving abroad for better access or cheaper out-of-pocket costs, but your U.S. safety net does not travel with you. Specifically, Medicare.
Wait, I pay into Medicare my entire working life. I have a portion of every paycheck taken out for decades, but the second I retire to a beach in Costa Rica, I can't use it.
Generally speaking, no. Medicare does not pay for any healthcare services outside the United States. Period.
That is wild.
It means retirees abroad must arrange their own private healthcare coverage in their new country.
Okay, that sounds expensive.
Well, the silver lining here is that private coverage overseas is often significantly cheaper than anything you would find in the U.S. private market. However, it requires intense proactive planning well before you ever book a moving company.
I can imagine.
You have to navigate foreign insurance markets, understand local medical standards in a second language, and figure out exactly what pre-existing conditions are covered under a totally different legal framework.
So if the math is a no-brainer, if your $2,000 check makes you comfortable in Portugal, and you can buy a private health plan that costs a fraction of the U.S. equivalent, why aren't the airports just jammed with retirees?
Good question.
It sounds like an absolute cheat code for retirement.
Because the exit door is heavily guarded by red tape. Moving abroad is far more complicated than just booking a flight and overstaying a tourist visa. The friction is immense.
Right, you can't just declare yourself a resident of a new country. To get a long-stay visa, a retirement visa, or a residency permit, you have to prove to that foreign government that you are financially solvent. You usually have to prove a guaranteed minimum monthly income or show a massive lump sum bank balance.
Yes.
And the rules are completely fragmented. Countries that actively welcome retirees like Mexico, Panama, and Costa Rica, they all have completely different income floors, different health insurance requirements, and wildly different tax residency rules.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you also have to realize that these rules shift constantly based on the political winds of the host country.
Oh, for sure.
They can change the deal overnight. For example, the data points out that Portugal completely closed the real estate investment pass to its famous Golden Visa in 2023. And Spain went a step further, ending its Golden Visa program entirely in 2025.
Hold on, can we pause for a second? What exactly is a golden visa? I hear that term thrown around a lot in these expat circles, but explain it to me like I am 5.
Simply put, a Golden Visa is a residency by investment program. It allowed a foreign national, like an American retiree, to basically buy their way into legal residency.
Okay.
Historically, in places like Portugal or Spain, if you bought a piece of real estate over a certain price threshold, usually around €500,000, the government would grant you a long-term visa. It was a fast track for wealthy expats.
Ah, I see.
But because it drove up local housing prices so severely, Those countries are now shutting the programs down.
Okay, that makes sense. So the door is actively closing in some of the most popular European destinations. But even if you manage to get a standard retirement visa, even if you navigate the local healthcare system, you still have to deal with the United States government.
And this is where it gets tough.
Okay, let's unpack this because here is where the paperwork truly becomes a nightmare. Let's talk about the financial disclosure rules, starting with something called the FBAR.
The FBAR, it stands for the Report of Foreign Bank and Financial Accounts. It is a treasury report that you have to file separately from your regular tax return. And the threshold to trigger this requirement is incredibly low.
The source data says the FBAR kicks in once the combined balance of your foreign accounts exceeds $10,000 at any point during the year.
Yep.
Wait, $10,000? That can't be right. That is a few months' rent in a major city, not some secret offshore hedge fund. Are they really tracking retirees over 10 grand?
They absolutely are. And this is where it is important to understand the why behind these laws.
Okay, why?
The FBAR and subsequent laws like it were originally designed to catch billionaire tax evaders hiding immense wealth in secret Swiss bank accounts.
Right.
The government wanted to crack down on money laundering and massive corporate tax dodging. But the net they cast was so wide and the threshold was set so low that it accidentally caught middle-class retirees just trying to buy groceries in Lisbon.
That is absurd. If you have a local checking account in Costa Rica just to pay your local landlord and keep a tiny emergency fund for a medical issue, you are almost certainly going to hit that $10,000 mark at some point.
And if you hit it, you're legally obligated to report those accounts to the U.S. Treasury, with severe penalties if you forget or file incorrectly.
Wow.
But it does not stop there. The data also highlights an even heavier piece of legislation. It's called AFA-TICA.
The Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act?
Enacted in 2010. This law adds even more paperwork. It requires expats to file IRS Form 8938 if they hit higher thresholds, specifically if a single filer living abroad has $200,000 in foreign assets at year-end.
So if you sell your 3-bedroom house in the U.S. and buy a modest condo outright in Panama, boom, you're caught in the FAFA-TICA.
Exactly. But the most disruptive part of FAFSA isn't just the paperwork burden on the individual retiree. It is that the law obligates foreign banks to report their American account holders directly to U.S. tax authorities.
The U.S. government essentially deputized every bank on planet Earth to act as an auditor for American citizens.
Which leads to massive real-world fallout for anyone trying to live abroad. The compliance costs for a foreign bank to report all this data to the IRS are so high, and the financial penalties for messing it up are so steep, that many foreign banks have simply decided American customers are not worth the trouble.
According to the Association of Americans Resident Overseas, this advocacy group mentioned in our sources, the fallout hits on both sides of the border. Some foreign banks will flat out refuse to open an account for you if you show up with a U.S. passport.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
You literally cannot even get a basic checking account to pay your light bill. And back home, it is just as bad. U.S. banks are increasingly likely to close accounts held by Americans living abroad with almost no notice because of the compliance headaches.
And it isn't just checking accounts. Your retirement savings get completely tangled up in this net, too.
The data notes that some major U.S. brokerages will not keep IRAs or 401k accounts open if the account holder has a foreign address on file. Imagine the panic of that.
It would be terrifying.
You spend 40 years carefully building a nest egg in a 401k. You finally move to Mexico to stretch those dollars. You update your address to be totally honest with the system, and your brokerage sends you a letter saying, "Sorry, we have to close your account."
It creates an environment of immense friction. You are caught between two distinct financial systems that both view you as a massive regulatory liability.
It is like wearing a bureaucratic ankle monitor. You can travel as far as you want, you can sit on a beautiful beach thousands of miles away, but the IRS still knows exactly what is sitting in your grocery checking account, and they are making your life miserable for it. It is completely inescapable.
Which is exactly why the friction acts as a massive filter.
Wow.
We look at the polling and we see 44% of people dreaming of this escape. But when you look at the reality of proving your income for visas, navigating private foreign healthcare, filing FBARs, and dealing with global banking lockouts, you suddenly understand why the official count of those who actually do it is barely 1%. The red tape is the barrier.
It really is. So let's summarize this journey we have been on. For you listening, if you are one of those millions of people daydreaming about it, retiring abroad is a beautiful idea. And it is an idea heavily supported by the cost of living math.
Absolutely.
When your monthly expenses outpace your Social Security check by $3,000, crossing a border looks like a brilliant financial lifeline. But our deep dive today shows that it is fundamentally a massive logistical, legal, and financial undertaking. It is a major life transition that requires a complex spreadsheet, an understanding of international tax law, and an incredible amount of patience, not just a suitcase and a passport.
And I think there's a final thought you should take away from all this data, something to mull over as you think about the realities of international living.
What's that?
There is an ultimate irony to retiring abroad as an American. Many people look overseas specifically to escape the pressures, the high costs, and the frustrating systems of the United States.
Right.
Yet because of these incredibly complex tax laws, because of global banking regulations like FATSI, and because of the need to secretly maintain U.S. addresses just to preserve basic healthcare and voting rights, moving to a foreign country might actually entangle you more deeply in the American bureaucratic machine than if you had simply stayed home.
Wow. You leave to escape the system and you end up fighting it harder than ever just to survive on a beach.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some real clarity on a highly romanticized topic. Keep questioning the data behind the headlines, keep looking for the hidden realities, and remember, before you sell everything to move to that cozy European village, make sure you know exactly how heavy that bureaucratic ankle monitor is going to be.